Chapter 6. Jolene couldn't say anything about what she saw. It moved quickly over the leaves, and then the mist covered it. As the others turned around, she drew Grace into her embrace. Howard was holding his shotgun, ready to fire. The three armed men formed a circle around the others. "What the hell was that?" inquired Howard. "I have no idea," Jerry said. "It was too fast, and when did the mist get this thick?" "Something is very wrong with this place," the priest replied, but Colm returned his gaze and made a thin line with his lips. Colm nodded and turned to face the direction his gun was pointing. "We don't have time for your mysterious, dark nonsense." "But you can feel it, can't you?" Norman inquired. Behind Jolene, he was trembling. He tried clutching his right hand in his left, but it didn't help much. Both hands shook viciously. Nobody responded, but it was clear that they were all feeling it. There was something in the mist, something in the air. It made them shiver with fear. Fear weighed heavily on their shoulders like a boulder. If they stayed there, it wouldn't be long before one or all of them tipped over the edge and went insane. The wind rustled the leaves and shook the mist. It swirled but didn't go away. It only appeared to move. They all stood silently for what seemed like hours, waiting for whatever was causing the hopelessness to appear, but it never did. "Perhaps we should keep going?" the priest inquired. "Or should I go back?" Norman questioned. Howard gave him a hard stare before taking a deep breath. He lowered his gun and extended his hand forward. He moved slowly, hoping to get away if anything struck him in the mist. Nothing happened. "Forward," he said, his voice more raw. Then he took a step forward, and an ear-splitting cry tore through the forest. The pain was noticeable. It sounded like a flock of pigs whining in agony and pleading for help. Grace sobbed. The sound of pain drowned out her wailing. Jolene drew her daughter nearer, but the others turned around to find out what was making the noise. But it was coming from all directions, as if the cry was echoing through the forest, bouncing off leaves, trees, and mist. It sounded so close that it could have happened just a few feet away. The cry was long and continuous before changing to a whine. They were wailing and pleading for help, all begging to be killed if they couldn't be saved. "There are many of them." Norman dropped to his knees as the priest began to pray and tried to close his ears, but it didn't work. He curved forward, pressing his face into the ground to drown out the screams. His body shook back and forth, and his eyes were shut. Then it was all over. Silence, as well as the uneasiness, slammed into them. Norman raised his head. Grace was sobbing, and Jolene was trying to comfort her. Except for Colm's heavy breathing and the priest muttering his prayers, the forest was quiet once more. Jerry then turned to face Howard, who nodded. "Something is here," Jerry said quietly. Norman scooted away from Jerry, his mouth wide open in surprise. Jerry sneered at the man, but then his gaze was drawn to Jolene, and he softened.
"What exactly is it?"
Jolene inquired. Jerry gave a shaky nod. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he could sense the scrutiny. Something was lurking in the mist, and it was watching. Jerry speculated that it could be an animal. That explains the whining. However, not the other. Neither does the sensation that is building up in your chest. Jerry stifled the thought, but there was one thing he couldn't deny: they had to leave. It didn't matter if it was a human or a wild animal out there. It would still kill them all. "We need to get moving," Howard said, but then he noticed the priest. The man's face had turned completely white. And his eyes were wide with fear. His hand shook as he slowly lifted it. Howard did as well, as did the other. 7 pairs of eyes were peering into the misty space with a large opening. Something was slowly rising on the other side. A black mass began to form, eventually transforming into a physical humanoid form covered in a thin dark cloak wrapped close to the body. The shape flew a few feet above the ground and returned their gaze. With a mummified face hidden behind a ripped black cloth, it lacked eyes, a nose, and a mouth. The bandages came undone, revealing decaying skin. Then the loose bandages fell off as the form grew slowly. The stench of rotten flesh engulfed them, choking them. Most of the arms were exposed. The torso was also opened, revealing decaying internal organs. The only part of the corpse that was covered entirely was the face. Skin slid off the body, and the exposed area glistened with slick wetness as it stood there. Jolene and the others were paralyzed by fear and unable to move. Jolene looked at it, perplexed how it could see them through the filth bandage wrapped around its head. Then she wondered if it could even see them. It stood there, shedding rotten flesh, and bearing more and more of its skin. And just when Jolene thought that was all it was going to do, it slowly lifted one hand. A wet, bony index finger pointed at them when it was finally up. The movement caused the flesh on the finger to slide off. And the mist engulfed them.